Hello everyone, and welcome to my Days of Our Lives official. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Steve and Chad have a phone conversation at the hospital. He reports hearing that Chad brought Abigail to Paris. Chad said he hopes it will bring back memories, but so far nothing specific has surfaced. Chad calls because he believes Steve is still leery of Abby. Steve expresses concern about him, but Chad says he's all right and that he's getting married to Abby. According to Chad, Abby recalled their vows, recalled how joyful they had been that day, and mentioned that being married would help her remember more. Chad ought to ask questions, just as Steve does. After stating that he was getting married and wishing Abby Steve the best, Chad ends the call. Days with Chad on the phone. Holly overhears Abigail on the phone with Mark, who is in the hospital, while walking through the streets of Paris. She claims this is all for Mom and that she is aware of the risks involved in her impending marriage to Chad. Mark claims that he saw Clyde and that he needs him to do one more thing. Abigail becomes aware that Holly is observing her abruptly. Holly addresses her as Abigail. Abby hangs up after telling Mark she has to go. Holly greets everyone and says her mother lives in Paris, which is why she came here. Holly claims that she only overheard her mention that she was getting married and didn't mean to listen in. Abigail claims that it was an impulsive choice. Holly, perplexed, explains that she brought up getting married as a result of her mother. Abigail claims that she discussed their mother's difficulties accepting her as her daughter with her brother JJ. Abigail believes that when she remarries, her mother would embrace her and her memories will come flooding back. Abigail says she needs to go buy a dress for her wedding, but it was good to run into her. Holly requests to accompany her. Holly meets Abigail on day. Abigail surprises Chad by bringing Holly back to her suite. Holly tells Chad that she came to visit her mother and had intended to book a hotel room as they embrace. Chad demands that she remain with them. He claims that Abigail requires a maid of honor and that they need a witness for the wedding. Days, Holly, Abby, and Chad. After helping Holly settle in, Chad goes back to Abigail. Chad assures her that their wedding day, which is tomorrow, will be ideal. They give hugs. As he returns to the hospital, Mark feels relieved that Abigail hung up because he is at a loss for words when informing her that Clyde wants him to kill Chad. Steve shows up out of nowhere. If there's anything he needs, Mark asks. Steve identifies himself as Kayla's husband, says his wife thinks highly of him, and claims he was looking for him. He wants his niece's DNA test to be redone and asks for a favor in return. He claims that a second test could provide his family with peace of mind because they are finding it difficult to accept the results. After Mark consents to retake the exams, Steve provides him with fresh examples from Thomas and Abigail. Mark promises to work quickly and leaves for the lab. Afterwards, Mark comes back to Steve to inform him that Abigail and Thomas have a perfect DNA match and that the results are definitive. Steve gives Mark his appreciation. Who would have guessed Kayla and I are mother and son? Steve jokes as Mark walks away. He understands that Mark is not Abigail and that he fabricated the results. Further, the real-life lady love of Eric Martsolf. Maggie is informed by Xander outside the Brady pub that Kristen has found a treatment for Sarah's paralysis, courtesy of Dr. Rolfe. According to Xander, Kristen is prepared to offer it to them in exchange for Brady's charges being dropped. Maggie labels Kristen as insane, and since they aren't the DA, they are unable to have the charges withdrawn. Xander draws attention to the fact that EJ only has Sarah's testimony, and EJ threatens to charge Sarah with perjury if she makes any modifications to her declaration. EJ is determined to see Brady go to jail. He claims it's all his fault, Brady is going to jail, and Sarah might never walk again. Maggie queries how he's at fault for this. In order to prevent him from killing Brady, Xander tells the police that Sarah doesn't recall Brady beating her. Xander sobs that he wanted justice for Sarah, and that Sarah had lied to the police when she found out what he was going to do. Maggie hears Xander outlining his strategy. Maggie sobs, saying she told him that his need for vengeance would not lead to anything positive. Brady will be imprisoned and Sarah will never receive the cure, according to Xander. Is she against him? Xander queries. Maggie claims she could never be hated by him, but he is his own worst enemy and the ones he loves are harmed by his need for vengeance. Maggie promises to speak with Kristen in the hopes of persuading her to provide Sarah with this medication. Xander believes that she is constantly solving issues that he causes. Maggie turns to leave after telling him that she is doing this for Sarah. Xander speaks about days. Eric tells Brady they have to talk about Fiona at the police station. Brady claims that when they first met, they were both in terrible situations and that he had no idea who Fiona was. Eric asks if Fiona drank that evening, disregarding it. Brady acknowledges that she did. Eric says Fiona put him in the driver's seat and drove that night. Brady labels Eric's concept as mere conjecture, but Eric encourages him to do some mental sleuthing. As Brady starts to remember the collision, he discovers Fiona was behind the wheel. Brady informs Eric that he heard Fiona mention that she believed she had struck someone while driving. "I didn't do it, I didn't hit Sarah," claims Brady. "I'm not guilty." Eric Brady discussing Fiona days. Sarah remembers watching Fiona drive the night she was struck when she was in her room at the Kiriakis' home. Fiona bursts into the room and Sarah exclaims, "It was you." "At last, I recall who was behind the wheel that evening." "You were the one." Fiona tells Sarah that she's perplexed and wonders where she got the notion. Sarah informs her that Eric informed her that she was at the pub drinking with Brady the night of the accident. Although Fiona acknowledges that she was with Brady that evening, it does not imply that she was responsible for her mishap. She acknowledges that she concealed her relationship from Xander because she didn't want their animosity to worsen. Fiona claims she made an attempt to talk Brady out of driving that evening, and Eric is giving her ideas because he is frantic to save his brother. Sarah acknowledges that she knows it was Fiona. Sarah looks in terror, her lips parting and her eyes bulging. Fiona queries Sarah about her motivations, noting that she never really remembered what transpired the previous evening. Sarah responds that she does now, but Fiona points out that Brady's brother has given suggestion power to this. Sarah believes Fiona had some alcohol as well. Sarah says she's going to call Xander because she's tired of her resistance. Sarah and Fiona recall days. Fiona grabs her phone and claims she may lose her son, so she can't call Xander. Sarah is unconcerned. Fiona lets it all out, saying that Sarah never realized how alone she was until she had her kid and a family. Fiona insists it was a mishap. She acknowledges that she was drinking, but she felt that she was acting appropriately because Brady was so much worse. She sobs, saying she didn't intend to hurt her, and she briefly looked away from the road. She claims that although she was shocked when she hit her, she fled since she could hear Xander approaching and knew she would be all right. Fiona maintains that she despises herself for her actions. "Not enough to frame Brady for what you did," yells Sarah. Fiona claims she didn't think Brady would turn himself in and didn't want him to go to jail. Although she assumed Brady would be safe, Sarah went and found him. Brady will now serve 10 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, Sarah informs her, adding that she did that to save Xander. Sarah claims she will tell everyone what Fiona did, regardless of whether EJ sentences her to prison for lying. "I'm sorry, darling, I just can't let you do that," Fiona says to her. Fiona says she's extremely sorry, but she's going to have a terrible accident as she starts to push Sarah's chair towards the stairs. Fiona says Xander will discover Sarah at the foot of the stairs, where they will believe she lost control of her chair and no one will be the wiser. Sarah tries to fight Fiona off. Abruptly, Xander shows up, stops his mom, and declares, "Well, except for me." Fiona attempts to murder Sarah days.